both sides. Becoming a cycle breaker. Introducing the Cycle Breaker series. Welcome back. I'm Christina Fox. If you've been listening to me for a while, you know that I talk a lot about both sides of addiction. The person struggling with addiction and the people who love them. Because addiction rarely begins with one person and its effects rarely stop with one person. So today I want to talk about something that can change what happens on both sides. Becoming a cycle breaker. When we hear the words breaking the cycle of addiction, we usually think about the person using drugs or alcohol, getting sober, going to treatment, changing their environment, staying away from people, places, and things connected to their addiction. And yes, that is absolutely part of breaking the cycle. But I think breaking the cycle goes much deeper than stopping the substance. Because sometimes addiction is the most visible part of a cycle that started long before the addiction ever did. Generational addiction, trauma, abandonment, abuse, neglect, unhealthy relationships, poor boundaries, or sometimes never being taught what boundaries are in the first place. I know I wasn't taught them. And the more I listen to other people's stories and witness their struggles, the more I realize how many of us weren't. Every one of these things can become generational. Some vulnerabilities can be carried through our genetics. Others are passed down through what we witness, what we're taught, how we're raised, how we learn to cope, and what becomes normal inside our families. Sometimes we're carrying patterns that started long before we were even born. And unless somebody recognizes them and decides to do something differently, those patterns can keep moving from one generation to the next. That's what we're talking about when we talk about becoming a cycle breaker. These can also be mental health struggles that were never addressed, families that didn't talk about what happened, pain that everybody learned to survive, but nobody really learned how to heal. And sometimes we pass those things down without even realizing we're doing it. That's why becoming a cycle breaker isn't just something I'm asking of the person in recovery. It's something we can all look at. Maybe you're the person trying to break the cycle of addiction in your own life. Maybe you're a mother or father realizing there were things in your family that affected the way you raised your children. Maybe you're a spouse who has spent years rescuing, fixing, covering up, or trying to control someone else's addiction. Maybe you're an adult child who grew up in addiction and promised yourself your life would be different. Or maybe you're looking at generations of your family and realizing, this didn't start with me. But here's the important part. It can change with me. Number 1, admit what needs to change and ask for help. For someone struggling with addiction, this may mean admitting that the substance has taken control. That doesn't make you weak. It means you're finally willing to look at what's happening without running from it. But loved ones have things to admit too. Maybe we have to admit, I can't save them. I have been enabling things because I was terrified of what would happen if I didn't. I've spent so much time managing their life that I've stopped living mine. There are things from my own past that I haven't dealt with. Breaking cycles requires honesty from everybody. Not blame, honesty. Because we can't change something we're unwilling to acknowledge. And sometimes that honesty means getting outside help, treatment, counseling, recovery programs, support groups, trauma therapy, family counseling, whatever appropriate support looks like for you. There is no prize for carrying everything alone. Number 2, develop healthy habits. When addiction has been part of your life for a long time, chaos can start feeling normal. And that can happen on both sides. For the person in recovery, healthy habits might mean developing structure again. Sleeping, eating, exercising, working, going to meetings or counseling, meditating, journaling, learning how to sit with uncomfortable emotions without escaping them. But loved ones need healthy habits too. Because while someone else was living in addiction, many of us developed our own survival habits. Constantly checking the phone, trying to figure out where they are, waiting for the next crisis, losing sleep, canceling our plans, neglecting ourselves, living in a constant state of what's going to happen next. Those habits don't disappear automatically because someone gets sober. We have healing to do too. Healthy habits are how we begin teaching our minds and bodies. We don't have to live in survival mode forever. Number 3, create a support system. Isolation feeds addiction, but isolation can destroy loved ones too. The person struggling may isolate because of shame. The loved one may isolate because they're embarrassed, exhausted, or tired of explaining what's happening. Pretty soon, everybody is hurting separately. That's why support matters on both sides. Find people you can be honest with, people who don't shame you, people who don't encourage unhealthy behavior either, people who can support your healing without taking responsibility for it. And remember, a support system isn't supposed to do the work for us. It's supposed to remind us that we don't have to do the work alone. Number 4, set goals and make a plan. Saying I want things to change is a beginning, but eventually change needs a plan. For someone entering recovery, that plan may include treatment, meetings, employment, housing, counseling, repairing relationships, managing triggers, or creating a relapse prevention plan. But loved ones need plans too. What are my boundaries? What will I do if relapse happens? What am I willing to help with? What am I no longer willing to participate in? What does my life look like outside of someone else's addiction? And here's something I think both sides need to hear. Don't make the goal getting back to who we used to be. The goal isn't to go backwards. It's to become healthier people than we were before addiction exposed everything that wasn't working. Breaking the cycle doesn't mean blaming the generation before you. This part matters. When we start looking at generational patterns, it can become very easy to start pointing fingers. My parents did this. My childhood caused that. They should have known better. And sometimes there are very real things that need to be acknowledged. People may need to take responsibility. Conversations may need to happen. Counseling may be necessary. But understanding where something came from isn't the same thing as staying trapped there. Eventually we have to ask, now that I can see the pattern, what am I going to do differently? That's where cycle breaking begins. Maybe your parents didn't know how to talk about emotions. You can learn. Maybe addiction has existed in your family for generations. You can choose recovery. Maybe your family confused rescuing with loving. You can learn healthy boundaries. Maybe everybody swept trauma under the rug. You can be the person who finally talks about it. Maybe nobody apologized. You can learn how to take accountability. Maybe nobody forgave. You can learn what forgiveness means without pretending the hurt didn't happen. And maybe nobody before you knew how to heal. You can learn. That doesn't erase what happened. It changes what happens next. The cycle breaker isn't always the person everyone expects. Sometimes the cycle breaker is the person who gets sober. Sometimes it's the mother who finally stops rescuing. Sometimes it's the father who admits the mistakes he made. Sometimes it's the child who finally says, I'm not carrying this into my own family. Sometimes it's the person who goes to counseling when generations before them refuse to talk about anything. Sometimes it's the person who says, I love you, but I can't participate in this anymore. And sometimes it's the person in recovery who says, what happened to me wasn't my choice, but healing from it is my responsibility now. That's how cycles begin to break. Not through perfection, through awareness, accountability, boundaries, healing, different choices, and the willingness to do something differently, even when doing something differently feels uncomfortable. Because somebody has to be the first one to talk about it, the first one to get help, the first one to stop enabling, the first one to choose recovery, the first one to apologize, the first one to set the boundary, and the first one to deal with the trauma instead of passing it down. Why can't that person be you? You didn't create every wound that was handed to you, but you do get to decide what you hand to the next generation. And whether you're listening today as someone in recovery or as someone who loves a person struggling with addiction, maybe breaking the cycle doesn't mean fixing everybody around you. It starts with one question. What can I change in me? Because when one person begins healing differently, the pattern has already started to change. This is how we heal from both sides. Understanding both sides. One goal, healing. I'm Christina Fox, and I'll see you next time.